Well, if you go outside and see thunder and lightning, don't go blaming the weatherman. Here's a look at the brand new Hasbro Marvel Legends X-Men 97 Storm. Bring the excitement and wonder of the Marvel Universe to your collection with the Hasbro Marvel Legends Storm and other X-Men action figures. This collectible 6-inch scale action figure is detailed to look like Storm from the Marvel Studios X-Men 97. Storm Marvel Legends figures fully articulated with premium design and posable head, arms, and legs. This Marvel action figure comes with 2 accessories. Hasbro's Marvel action figure 6-inch scale makes them great for posing and displaying in fans' collections. Now, just before we get a closer look at... I hear thunder outside. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Storm's getting pretty close. Speaking of which, before we get a closer look at this storm, we're going to go ahead and grab the tape measure and see how tall the figure stands. And then, of course, I'll bring in a couple of figures in a moment for comparison's sake. Storm stands with Mohawk as high as she has. The figure's only about 6 inches in height, or the figure's going to be about 16 centimeters tall. Storm does have work colleagues after all. Let's bring those in right now. Here's what the figure looks like along with Gambit. Here's what the figure as well looks like with Rogue, who has a harder time. In fact, all the figures I've looked at here, both Gambit and Rogue on either side of Storm are the hardest ones to stand. A figure that has no tough time standing is in fact Wolverine. It might have something to do with just the fact he's so close to the ground like that. And a figure that doesn't have any issues with standing but has bigger issues, much far greater issues than just the standing. Here's also what she looks like with Magneto. Now, I was always brought up to believe that you can always find something nice to say about the person that you're talking to. Well, I will say, in the credit of Magneto, well, his head sculpt is a dog's breakfast. I will say, at least I like the color scheme of his body. The purples and the reds are really rich on the figure. It's just a shame that the head is in such shambles. Speaking of shambles, I want to draw your attention to the fact that Storm, with all the things that the figure could have technically possessed, maybe like storm effects, for example, only gets relegated to swappable hands, and they just happen to be the swapped out alternate versions of the ones that are in either sides of her forearms. Is that really the best that we're going to be getting when it comes to these X-Men figures? I mean, Gambit, sure, was thrown with accessories, and same could be said for Wolverine. But then all the figures that we've looked at afterwards have all come with basically just swapped out hands. It happened the same already with Magneto, and it happened also as well for Rogue. Storm seems to follow that trait as well. Like I said, she only comes included with swappable hands. So if you grew attached to this side of her body, liking the look of those hands, you could basically repeat that on a mirror flip. She comes with the alternate hand to that. That's going to go, of course, on this side. And then, of course, she also comes with a gripping hand, too. Or, I guess, more of a closed-fisted hand. I mean, it's fine and good, but I would have liked something else above and beyond that. The figure really does need more than just hands. Speaking of hands, though, while I can already see myself already changing out the hands, I'm just going to do it already. So I'm just going to pop the hand that's already there. This also draws one thing I did want to bring to your attention is the fact that the cape that she has, really not like the way it's attached on the back of her body, and it only really just slides onto her forearm by these tiny little threadings, these ropings. They're roped around and basically just drip it around her forearm like this, and then you just put the hand back in place. I guess there really isn't any other functional, reasonable way that they could have attached the cape. I was trying to think to myself, like, what other way could they have done it where it doesn't just draw to the attention of the fact it clearly is just a rope that they taped or sewn around the actual cape. But I mean, the only problem with that is, say they had put a hole just right there for all intents and purposes, and that was the hole that would then fit onto her arm. Sooner or later, that would get frayed. Sooner or later, that hole would widen, and sooner or later, I'm sure that hole would rip. It's a bit messy, I have to admit, the way they've actually sewn it in place. But it gets the job done, and I can't really think of any other way it could have gotten the job done, other than maybe if they had adhered a ringlet, like a little plastic ringlet on the end of it. It probably still would have looked like a sore thumb, but probably would have not had at least the stitching on the end of it, because I think that's a little ugly. Speaking of little ugly, I have to say, like, the way that this is also attached on the back of her body is a bit on the ugly side. You can see, like, what they've done essentially is they've attached the cape onto a plastic piece. You can see right there. If you see this in the packaging, by the way, don't think that that's something that has to be removed, because the cape is actually sewn onto that. And then this plastic piece is actually attached onto either side. Well, it's actually not even attached on either side. If it was to say flip this up, it's basically just a clear, kind of like clear strapping that's underneath the shoulder pads. When I first actually took it out of the packaging, I thought that the shoulder pads were the thing that was keeping the cape in place. But the shoulder pads are actually a separate piece, and it's literally just this thin Okay, you see right there that little thin strip of plastic. So essentially what it is, it's just wrapping around the front of her body. Luckily, though, you don't see it anywhere from the front. It's only basically just relegated to the back. But the cape, I will say, is really poorly executed. But again, do I have better ideas in mind? No, I don't design toys for a living. Maybe I should, but I don't. The cape itself, for what it is, sort of more like a parachute material. You can see it does have the yellow striping on the outside of it, at least. And I think the material is pretty good. I just don't think it's well handled the way they actually attached it around her forearms. Closer look, though, at the head sculpt is one thing I actually do really like about the head. I do really like about the figure. The head sculpt, for me at least, bears some resemblance, maybe you can see it or not, to Vivica A. Fox. Maybe am I the only one that sees that? I see a little bit of Vivica A, maybe in the head sculpt of Storm. And I do like the way they've actually decided to sculpt this time around a mohawk. In the original 90s series, the Storm actually character would have had a full head of hair. So I really like the departure from that and giving her a mohawk instead. Now, she's had also a mohawk in the comics as well. I think it's a look that works quite well for the character. She does also have like little lightning bolts there for her earrings. I think that's a nice touch as well. I can't help but also notice, and I'm doing my best not to draw all the negative points out, but if you look at the figure's neck, on the one side it seems to be fine. On the other side, there's a little bit of a marring. You can see like there's a little bit of deformed plastic, at least on the side of my neck. I can't imagine it's going to be across the board. Maybe it is going to be across the board if it's got all coming from the same mold after all. But you can probably see it. There's this like little ring light right there. Maybe she got herself a flu shot back in the 80s. And then, of course, she does have the long hair there on the back as well. This is all basically molded in white plastic. By the way, it looks like it's attached onto her head. It doesn't look like it's actually been painted rather than molded in white plastic instead. But the head sculpt, for what it is, I think it's actually good. It's probably one of the better ones we've gotten from this line so far. And as for the rest of the figure's body, she has more the standard white Rogue, white Storm body, which has still the matching yellow stripe down the side. It's not maybe as quite the brightness, obviously, as what we get here for the cape, but the color of the yellow is pretty close. She has it down the side of her body. She has it across the front of her belt as well. The yellow doesn't seem in places to be matching. You can kind of see like the belt's a little bit brighter. Actually, in fact, the belt looks a little bit more closer, I would say, to the cape. But the striping is still pretty close to that. Of course, she's got the Xmen symbols on either sides of her shoulder pads. And as for the lower half of her body, it's basically no paint. It looks to be just the case that they molded it all in white plastic. Peg holes are still treated to you at the bottom of the figure's feet. So even though the figure doesn't come include with display stands, figure at least has the means to use the same diameter sized pegs as other display stand companies that are, well, other companies out there that are providing display stands for their figures. So you can easily use that for this one as well. For the articulation here for Storm, let's go back to her head sculpt here. For obvious reasons, the long ponytail on the back of her head is going to cause a little more problems, a little more corruption when it comes to trying to rotate the head all the way around, just because the ponytail is going to get a little bit more in the way of things. The head can look down that far and look up as well. In between, you can rock it back and forth as well. The upper torso is going to be on a ball joint, and quite the generous ball joint, too. I mean, obviously, if you move it too far back, you can notice a little bit of gappage, but who really is going to be posing their Storm or any one of the Marvel Legends figures looking like this? That looks ridiculous, so you're going to want to bring it a little bit further forward. And, of course, it does also rock back and forth as well. Now, for the arms hinge out, but I found my arms, not my arms, but Storm's arms were a little on the more tighter side. This arm is actually the tighter of the two. Once you loosen things up, though, she actually can have the means to swivel her arms or hinge her arms at 90 degrees. You can take those arms and move them forward, but you can only go so far, of course, even though she has plastic shoulder pads. And they're actually attached. Let me just get the arm out of the way here. They're actually attached here on the front. I don't know if you can see it or not. And that's actually kind of the way as well that the cape is attached in place. That little strap of plastic that we looked at earlier essentially is plugged onto a black peg, and then basically the shoulder pad is attached over top of it. It looks like there is the means to detach this, basically just like a snap, but I don't know why I would really want to do that. I mean, obviously you could do that, I suppose, if you want to take the cape off altogether, but I think like the cape is one thing that certainly adds to the character of Storm. The lower half of her body is all attached to her mid area, so you're not going to be able to have any swiveling there. However, though, the figure does have a hinge. You can split the legs quite far with a ball joint provided in the inside cavity of her thighs. You can take the legs and move them forward, no problems there. You can also move them back about that far. Swiveling the legs about 3/4 of the way up the thigh. You can double hinge the knee. And of course, she has the same standard articulation back and forth on her ankle and back and forth this way as well. It also is to note as well that the figure, if I can just get her to stand here for a second, is a slight bit different than the one we get here for Rogue. Just going to bring Rogue in here for a second. Rogue seems to have slightly thicker thighs. It also looks as well that she has a different torso. I mean, maybe it's just more my eyes playing tricks on me. But like the sculpting that they did put to this section of Rogue isn't present here at all when we're looking at Storm. So it looked like possibly they are using a different body. I don't know why, again, I can't get Rogue. I can't get Rogue to stand properly. But yeah, of the two figures, it does look like they are using different types of bodies. At the end of the day, though, I do really like, I'm just going to move this one away. I just know she's ultimately going to be falling. At the end of the day, though, I do really like the look of Storm. I didn't think I was going to like the idea necessarily that she was going to have herself a mohawk, just because, again, growing up and watching the original series of X-Men, I always liked the idea that Storm, for example, had a full lock of hair. But instead, what they decided to do instead was to shave the head, shave the sides of the hair. And actually, I think the look looks quite good to her. Modernizers her in such a way that at least she looks different from her original 90s counterpart. But also as well, it still sticks to the basics of what Storm always was in the original cartoon. Even though I don't like the cape and the way it's attached onto the figure, I do like at least the figure that the cape's attached to. The rope, I think, could have been handled a little bit better on Hasbro part by simply not just sewing on a rope on the end of this plastic cape and then attach that onto the ends of her forearms. It looks fine on the other side, but if you have the arms up, for example, you can see right away the way that it's sewn in place. And I think, again, it looks a little on the sloppier side. I would love if there was a way to swap the cape or flip the cape around. In other words, take the cape off, obviously, from the forearms, take the back of the cape and flip it around. Now, obviously, you'd be then seeing a plastic piece instead of the cape, but I wonder if it would attach the same way, because obviously it fits around the snaps on the front via holes. You got to think that the holes are going to be all the way through, obviously, on those plastic strips. I wonder if there is a way, in fact, to flip the cape around. Now, obviously, it will mean that the cape's going to then look ugly from the back, but you're not going to be looking at the cape, not likely going to be looking at the figure as well from the back. You're going to be displaying her from the front. I'm going to try that. I don't think I'm going to be all that successful, but I definitely would like to try it and at least see if there's a better way to display the cape than what we're looking at right now. The rest of Storm, though, looks fantastic. I didn't think, again, I was going to like the idea of her with a mohawk. I was really like the more fuller hair on Storm. But I got to say, it does work quite well for the figure. And even though she does, I feel, bear a resemblance, a little more than a slight resemblance as well, to Vivica A. Fox. You got to wonder where they get their ideas from when they're sculpting these figures initially. If they were looking at that and they thought to themselves, hey, I need to sculpt a face. What can I work with? And then they just happen to be watching an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, or maybe they were watching Independence Day and thought, hey, Vivica A would be ideal for Storm. You got to wonder what their mindset is when it comes to certainly sculpting these figures, and some may even say she bears no resemblance at all to Vivica A. Fox. I happen to think the opposite. Head sculpt, though, is pretty, and I like the way they've painted the face, both the eyes, and of course adding the little lightning bolt earrings on the sides. Those are a nice little touch. Yeah, all in all, it's a good-looking Storm, even though I just don't like the cape. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. And of the figures we've looked at so far, granted, yes, we still have to look at Bishop, but of the figures that we've looked at so far, what would you say is your favorite? I'm still sticking, I think, with Gambit number 1, Wolverine number 2, Storm number 3. Maybe I'll go Storm number 3. I was going to say Rogue number 3, but I don't know. Storm's growing on me. I might go Storm, Rogue, and of course, as to be expected, Magneto is still the distant last. That's, I don't think, going to be changing anytime soon, because of course we are still going to be looking at Bishop. His review will be coming shortly. Of course, if you guys enjoyed this video, want to hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for the reviews of Bishop, definitely, though, make sure if you haven't already done so that you hit that subscribe button down below, and you're as well turning on the bell notification. You want to check out some more Marvel Legends? You got a little bit more time on your hands? Well then, popping up at the very end of this video, shamelessly plugging a playlist, I'm sure, but also you can check out the playlist. That's all the other Marvel Legends I've looked at over the years, with many more to follow. Of course, as always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.